Welcome to Breakthrough Economy. I'm Jen Rogers at Nasdaq Market Site. Our next guest has been called the Edison of medicine. He is one of the world's most cited and prolific scientists. He is also a co-founder of Moderna, the now household name that developed an mRNA vaccine against COVID-19. Bob Langer, Institute Professor at MIT and head of the Langer Lab at MIT. It is fantastic to have you with us. Thanks so much.
Oh, it's a pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for asking.
I want to get started on the mRNA front. How did the pandemic expand the application and development of mRNA technology? And will it give us another game changer in the space soon?
So if you go back to January of 2020, Moderna was we were in 13 clinical trials, phase 1 and phase 2. But with the urgency of trying to obviously stop that pandemic and treat people, really Moderna scientists designed the vaccine in less than 2 days. And the first clinical trial was, within 2 months. And that's the phase 1 trial. And the phase 3 trial, we had the data, within about 10 months from then. And I think that was because of the pandemic. Really accelerated everything. In terms of your other question, what's next? To me, there are a lot of things I think that are what's next, but one that I think I'm personally excited about are what I guess I call personalized cancer vaccines, which could be a whole new way of thinking about treating cancer, where you really, by understanding the mutations in the individual's cancer, you can design a vaccine that can be what I'll call a therapeutic vaccine. In other words, something that could attack that tumor and destroy it. So that to me is I think a very exciting area, that could be what's next.
So beyond the vaccine applications, and you touched a little bit on some of the possibilities in terms of cancer, you've had your hand in regenerative medicine, also delivery systems for drugs. So when you look at the work that you're doing right now, we've read about the future of insulin, as you mentioned, anti-cancer drugs, but also gene therapy agents. How, when you look at the whole landscape, do you think we're going to see the biggest breakthroughs in certain places, or could it be coming all at once?
Well, I think you'll see breakthroughs in a variety of places. I also think about breakthroughs from two standpoints: research breakthroughs, which are like at an early stage, somebody makes a discovery, and then and then clinical, which I wouldn't necessarily call breakthroughs, but it's the validation of those early studies. And that's many years later, which goes to your last question. In other words, it's always a long distance between making a basic laboratory discovery and something that's clinically validated. From my standpoint, on some of the things you asked, though, I think some of the things that I hope we'll see are more targeted delivery for cancer treatments. For insulin, we're working on a couple things that you could give oral insulin. Gio Traverso and I, working with the support of Novo Nordisk, designed a pill that you can swallow that can deliver large molecules, including insulin. And we've published this in Science and Nature journals, and now Novo Nordisk has it in clinical trials. And then we've also developed with Dan Anderson, who was also one of my former postdocs, now professor at MIT, a way to encapsulate beta cells, the insulin producing cells, in a way where they won't get rejected. And that's another thing that could have a major impact on, an artificial pancreas that could someday have an impact on that disease. So there are a lot of different things that we're working on that, are at an early stage. Some of them are with companies.
What do you think investors and really the general public get wrong when they think about biotech? Are people too optimistic? Are they not optimistic enough?
Well, I think part of what investors could get wrong, and it really depends on the investors. There's some pretty sophisticated investors that do understand biotech. But just to pick an example, biotech is a lot of it's the promise, right? So I think, sometimes the general public thinks about things in terms of revenue, and revenue is very different from value. What happened, I remember with Moderna, when Moderna was valued at $5 billion, there were these, news media like Stat, they report some of these things, and they criticized Moderna. They said $5 billion, that valuation's ridiculous. It's never going to be close to that, and they ridiculed the company. Of course, now it's like $60 billion, but that's because of value. In other words, that smart investors didn't listen to them, right? They basically said, there's a lot of value in what Moderna is doing, and someday that value, because of the clinical trials and the general technology, would make a big difference in the world. So if you compared, for example, a Moderna or any of these companies when they were early, they had a lot of value, but maybe no revenue. But like I say, really smart investors, they did bet on Moderna and they did very well. But that's because probably they understood some of the things that I'm saying.
There's certainly the revenue piece, and also there's the piece of just changing the world and helping patients. And I know that's been a big part for you your entire career, is making that difference. So your research laboratory at MIT, it's the largest biomedical research lab in the world. When you look out at what you're working on right now and that breakthrough that could make a difference for the most amount of people, what do you think that is that gets you just most excited about the future?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. Let me try to say a few things on that. You're right. I mean, I'm an academic. I spend my life at MIT, and that's my number one job. And I love training students to do things like you just said that can change the world and make it a better place. I'm excited about a lot of the things we're doing. One of the things I've been particularly excited about is work we're doing with the Gates Foundation. Bill came to see me, and I think now about 10 years ago, and wanted to see if some of the things that we were doing that have had a big impact on, say, the developed world could have a big impact on the developing world. So what we've been able to do is design. One of the big issues is people not coming back. There's also side effects. So some of the things that we've done because of that are develop new pills that you could swallow that could last for an entire course of treatment, like a week or a month. There's a private company, Lindra, that's been developing that. In fact, the four top leaders of the company are all female. It's got 150 people and finished phase 2 trials. So that's an example of one. We're also developing what I'll call self-boosting vaccines, ways that, Anna Jakulenik in our labs and others, we've developed like a vaccine that you could give, but it's a cocktail of little nanoparticles or microparticles that will pop at discrete times, like not just time 0, but a month later, 6 months later. So you could give one injection and actually have many boosts, but you'd only go and get the shot once. And we're also developing on, new, better ways of nutrition. But I want to fully answer your question. And, a lot of what we do is really blue sky research. Some of it's led to, like you said, regenerative medicine, where we can make new tissues and organs, or organs on a chip. But I always think, I'm a big believer in basic research. And a lot of times, if you ask what's going to change the future the most, it won't have a word because it hasn't been discovered yet. And the example I would give on that is if I asked you, or really almost anybody 10 years ago, what CRISPR was, nobody would know. I mean, because the key papers, had yet to be published. But of course, now that's certainly, been a game-changing kind of technology. And I always think that's important to keep in mind, that really basic research can lead to things that can change the world. And those are the things that will also be a big part of our future.
So we'll have to talk in 10 years again and figure out what the word was that we should have been saying right now. I'm pretty sure it won't be one breakthrough we'll be talking about, but it'll be multiple breakthroughs coming out of your lab. Bob Langer, thank you so much for all you do, and also for taking some time to talk with us here.
Oh, it's an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. You've been watching Breakthrough Economy.